Well, this will be a very meandering mess because I've tried to structure and script this and rehearse it, but so excuse me because it will ramble a little bit. So the big news is that Liz Ferris is officially, I guess, leaving YouTube. If you're coming into this very late, Liz is a friend of Aaron Smith Levin and Aaron, along with Mike Rinder. They're not the only key figures, but they're perhaps the more major voices, helped construct a very strange online space called SPTV. There are other anti Scientologists, much better anti Scientologists like Jerry Armstrong, Doug Scott Kramer, the McLaurys, and so on and so forth. But you got to be honest, in terms of the numbers and popularity, Aaron Rinder, Claire Headley, and a few others have dominated the space. And Aaron had a big breakup with Rinder last year, and it had a seismic effect and even affected Liz to some extent. So, who is Liz in all this? Well, you got to be honest now that I think SPTV, since its inception, was kind of a grift. There were a few members like Doug Scott Kramer who were the exception, but for the most part, it was a toxic grift, but it was fairly moderate. It wasn't good, but it was a more moderate form of toxic grifting and victimizing people, feeding on people's sympathy and emotions, and really misleading people. And allegedly, Aaron was going to turn a new leaf and really begin anew, but nothing really changed in any real sense. And Liz has just been having a lot of problems lately, medical problems, psychological problems, and feeling isolated from people she thought were her friends like Aaron and Nora Ames. Serge, I don't think she's commented on, so I want to be careful there. But notably, when she did her farewell, I don't believe Serge showed up. It just seems it is what it is. A certain faction of SPTV claims that there's no cult, there's no control, but there is. And Liz, for a long time, apparently, has been kind of out of that group. They don't like her, they don't trust her, they don't want to be around her. And she's tried to put on a brave front, not have any right back and forth, no fighting, but she has let people know that, yeah, it's not what it appears to be. There is a lot of division in the community. So it would be easy for me, and I know I'm going to get some downvotes for this, that I will be somewhat critical of Liz. Listen, Liz has suffered. Liz has suffered a lot. I am not denying or diminishing her suffering. She lost her father to Scientology. Bob Ferris is still officially in the church, and she wants to see him. And she's just had a horrible time with Nora and Aaron. And I do think she's been victimized. However, I think lying about her is not helpful. So Liz has a very mixed record. She was there when all this craziness was happening, and as far as I know, pushed back on it only slightly. Right. She's friends with Lara FM, DOA, and some of the more crazy protest elements. Some of these people have attacked children. Remember, kids can't consent? Remember that? Kids can't consent, kids can't consent, kids can't. Pearl Snappy literally was screaming like a banshee at a teenager because he was a Scientologist. And not just like, oh, I don't like Scientology. No, she was full on cursing and trying to victimize this kid. Is Liz not aware of this? Is Liz Ferris really ignorant of the activities of her so-called friends? No, no. So it's good she's found some friends who are very dedicated to helping her. I do think that's good. But again, Liz is a very mixed record. And she's been caught lying a few times. She's been caught grifting. She's a huge fan of the Pokemon and can't seem to help herself and get the Pokemon stuff. Listen, I understand. I'm not into Pokemon myself, but I only have my own fanatical things. Like I really love comics. I really love movies. I have tons of books, way too many books. So you have these addictions, you have these traumas, you have all these dilemmas. So she's only a human being. So I don't really fault her too much for, again, spending some of the money on herself or her habits or hobbies or whatever. That's just being human. But it has gone way beyond that. I mean, her past is just so weird and tricky. She had a child, but apparently gave up the child. And she's acknowledged that. And I don't want to go more into that. Again, I'm not a mother. I've never been a mother, and I never will be a mother, so I don't know if that was a painful or necessary choice. But it is definitely weird. Also, her relationship with her current companion is kind of weird. Apparently, she's not officially divorced. So, what is going on with that? So, it's just a lot of weirdness and toxicity in the community. And I can't lie for Liz. She was a part of that. I will say she was less evil and less toxic than many other personalities. So, she's not Serge. She's not Aaron. She's not Nora. She's not even Liz Gale. And they've all done this very weird. And it's not one or two videos. It's just these weird ramblings over and over, getting people involved in all these conspiracies, false accusations, outright physically threatening people. Liz Gale literally directly threatened another person because they were angry that they were being critical of Aaron. So this is a very predatory, toxic, and ugly community. And let's be clear that there is a healthy part of anti-Scientology. There are many good, fine ex-Scientologists and many good anti-Scientologists. But I will be critical of all sides. I think Doug Scott Kramer was the gold standard. But listen, even Doug, he was never a grifter, but even he could be a little toxic. He could get a little angry. He could lash out. And again, Doug was flawed. And ironically, Doug introduced some predators into the community. I don't think he meant to, but Doug had his biases and he didn't see the flaws or problems with certain friends because they agreed with one another. The community as a whole is a very ugly place, but there were good people in it. And if even Doug gave in to toxicity, it just shows you that it's very pervasive. So, in my book, Doug is a hero. However, he's a very flawed hero, but nevertheless, he tried to educate people. He really tried to educate people. So, if you go to his channel, it's an incredible archive of material. I've only been able to get through a little small part of it. It's amazing work. I don't agree with everything there, but it's an amazing attempt to educate people on the evils of authoritarianism, these cults, and how they all connect to one another. And it's not just Scientology, but Satanism, the CIA, mind control. Again, I think he goes a little too far in a few places, but yes, it is all interlinked, and it's very shocking. I've studied this material, but from my own background. So it's very alarming, but very necessary work to go through it. I cannot claim the same thing for Liz at all, frankly. Liz Ferris is not really an educator. She just did some entertaining videos hanging out with friends, playing Pokemon, and complaining about Scientology. I don't want to diminish her pain. Her pain was very real. She faced a lot of ugliness and abuse, but even in this farewell video, I do have to push back the way she's describing herself as a slave. Well, we have to be clear about what did happen and did not happen. Are children, on the whole, abused in Scientology? No question. However, is it right to equate them to literal slaves, as in black slaves in the South? No, no. I hate to be that person, but I've studied all these subjects very thoroughly: fascism, slavery, genocide, mass murder, and state repression. Believe you me, Scientology is many things, and you can, as a metaphor, say that, because I do think Miscavige is a Hitler-like monster. He's incredibly evil. He's probably one of the most evil dictators on record. So he is extremely evil, no doubt about that. But were these children like literal black slaves? No. When you really study what happened to black slaves, it's insane. It's insane. They weren't even being fed properly. And if you think I'm lying, I just literally just going through a book called Caste that goes through this and provides a lot of documentation. It's a really horror story, however you look at Scientology, but it is not literally like slavery. It is simply not. And even children in Scientology were not literally like slaves. They weren't. Believe you me, if slaves tried to escape, like real slaves, the torture they endured or even the deaths were unimaginable. It was an insane amount of evil that was done to the black population of that time period. It is shocking. And again, unfortunately, slavery as a whole is an unappetizing subject. So it's just horrors all around when you study slavery. But nevertheless, I understand what Liz is saying. I just think that's the dilemma, is that they keep trying to, and there's no nice way of putting it, wiggle out of responsibility with this whole kids can't consent, kids can't consent, kids can't consent. And unfortunately, I have to keep pushing back on this because there is something that they don't really speak out about because it's just a convenient myth. When it comes to the evil done in Scientology, all the blame keeps getting shifted to David Miscavige. And there's no doubt he should get the majority of the blame. No doubt there either. But he can't be responsible for every evil act. You have some space for voluntary action. And what's even more alarming is when they leave Scientology, you think, oh, well, now they can make free choices and really help people and can't blame David Miscavige anymore. And no, listen, trauma is real, so they're still dealing with that. But you find the same thing all over again. So in Scientology, they blame David Miscavige. Out of Scientology, they blame David Miscavige. Even if it's their own actions, even if it's 100% their own actions, we blame David Miscavige. And I may be guilty of the same thing when I am very critical of Aaron, but we do have to place the majority of blame on Aaron in terms of why is this community so toxic? Why are there so many predators? Aaron is the key person. When we have Tommy Scoville and your moral tone is sent by a bank robber, well, we are where we are. So we should place the blame directly on those who deserve the blame. So definitely David Miscavige should be in jail. Danny Masterson should be in jail. Probably Mike Rinder should be in jail. And definitely Aaron should be in jail. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a world that's very flawed and very harsh. So I wish Liz the best of luck, but I don't think lying about her departure is going to do any good either. So I would say if you do have the resources, please help her out if you can. But I would also tell people if you want to get into a personal relationship with her, I think that's very dangerous. I think that's very, very dangerous. So on the one side, I'm optimistic, but also pessimistic that we've gone from a very weird history from Miscavige to Masterson to Aaron. So it seems like we're getting less evil throughout history, but I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think we're in a stasis point, and maybe that's just where we are, that a huge part of the community will always be toxic. You can minimize it, but it will just be there. You can do the best to avoid it, but you are going to get infected by the corruption if you stay around here too long. It just is what it is. So I can only do what I think is honest and forewarn people that there is a great part of anti-Scientology and there are better people in it, but there is a huge part of it that is very dark and ugly and frankly its own authoritarian cult. They use the word anti-Scientology, but really they're not doing that anti-Scientology. What Aaron is doing is Arontology, not anti-Scientology. And that is where we are. So I wish the best of luck to Liz. I hope she does better. I hope she gets better. I don't have the resources to help her, but even if I did, I'd be very hesitant. She's just not Doug Scott Kramer. She's not a real hero, but even though she did a lot of evil, she also helped some people too. She did a lot of harm, but she did help some people, so she's less evil than Aaron. And does that make her a good person? I don't think it does, but she could have been worse. She's not Nora. She's not Serge. She's not Aaron. She's not a complete lunatic. So hopefully she will get better. But she's not a good place. I hope she's found some people who will help her, but I'm not too hopeful. And there we are. It's a very sad career. But I do hope ultimately she finds her father and reunites. But again, we live in a very harsh reality. Maybe that won't happen. So it will just be a sad, tragic life that, yes, was destroyed by Scientology. But Liz, I think, if she wants to get better, has to look in the mirror and see that a lot of this destruction is self-destruction. It wasn't David Miscavige. It was you. You did the evil. Whether she did the evil even as a child, I don't know. We'd have to look more at her biography. But definitely as an adult, she has done some evil. And she's not willing to take responsibility. I understand that. So I will praise her goodness where it is, but it's very small. And I would blame mainly Aaron and Rinder and Miscavige for setting this up. That's true, but at the same time, I can't deny that she has done a little bit of evil and a little bit of lying. If you think that's worth forgiving or excusing or not talking about, that's you. I'm just trying to give a full picture for people because that's what's happening is that we're not getting the full picture. So the cycle keeps repeating itself. And if you want to keep being part of that cycle, that is you. But I hope we can move beyond the cycle. But maybe we can't. But we should try to get beyond the cycle at least.